One of the most important moments in a writer's life is when he or she sits down and suddenly realizes nobody really cares about me. I'm not saying that in a negative way, only in the sense that really, in real life, nobody has to read what you write. As a teacher, I have to read the papers that I assign to my students, but in the real world of writing, it's up to you as a writer to make the reader want to read what you've written. And that's why in writing an essay, especially something like a literary analysis essay, which don't exactly fly off the shelves at bookstores, um, it's really important to make the reader want to read what you write. It's a way of opening the door, right? If you open the door and people like you, they might come in, right? So that opening paragraph is so important. And there's no one way to write an opening paragraph. Really, it's all about getting the reader's attention and pointing them in the direction the essay is going to go. Nobody wants to be stuffed in the trunk of a car and driven to some unknown destination. That's an uncomfortable feeling, and it's like that with writing. A reader doesn't want to move along in an essay unless they have a certain sense of the direction it's going, or if your words and sentences and phrases and clauses are so interesting that they feel compelled to keep on reading. All right? So take some time to read my How to Writing Opening Paragraph PDF. Got my little philosophical part here. Then I've got a few different techniques for opening an essay. All right? These techniques work for almost any kind of essay. But the first technique is to drop your reader right into the scene. Right? If you're writing a narrative essay, that scene is one part of the experience you're writing about. If it's a literary analysis essay, I'll put a big quote up above the whole essay, a scene from the piece of literature. Then I'd sort of describe that scene, make sure I include all the who, what, when, where, why of what's happening in that scene, and then I'd transition to the thesis statement or the topic of your essay. I call that set the scene, state the theme. Right? You get the reader's attention by engaging their senses, their visual senses. See, touch, feel, hear, right? And then transition at the very last sentence to telling the reader what your essay is going to be about. You can see in this example right here, right? Every day at 10:30, it's the same. Kids dressed in pressed pants and Abercrombie shirts whip lacrosse balls at a shell-shocked youngster in front of an oversized net. Their language would make a sailor blush. The smallest kid out there raises his middle finger behind the back of the large and lurking upper schooler, the obvious bully. Far off to the side, two teachers are lost in conversation, oblivious to the teasing, taunting, and mayhem going on in front of them. All of this is happening at one of the most prestigious prep schools in the country. And here now, that was my setting of the scene. Now, here I shift to stating the theme, what this essay is going to be about. It has to make you ask, who are these schools hiring? And are they qualified to teach our most precious resource, the children of America? Now, a good reader is going to know that this is not going to be an essay about kids playing lacrosse. All right? It's not really going to be an essay about kids bullying each other. It's really going to be an essay about who are schools hiring. Right? Are we making the best choices in who we hire as teachers? And for anybody who's interested in that, they'll continue reading on. If they're not at all interested in that, they're not going to move on. So that's technique number one. Another way of doing it is allow the reader to enter the world of your imagination. All of us have pretty cool thoughts. We have ways of thinking. Right? So you sort of talk about something, you write about something that is interesting to you. Right? And this is a longer one. I'm not going to read it all, but it's the opening to an essay Thoreau wrote about trying to get rid of the things in life we don't need. And in it, he just kind of rambles on a bit about the kind of house he'd like to live in, the kind of farm he'd like to live in, what he thinks when he shows up at those places. But at the very end, he says, For a man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone. Right? And that is really Thoreau's way of saying this essay is going to be about trying to find a way to get rid of the stuff in life we don't need. That's really something that's interesting to a lot of people. Right? And it helped him make one of the most effective essays in all of literature, which is one of his chapters from Walden, Where I Lived and What I Lived For. Right? Another one of my favorite writers is a guy named Ralph Waldo Emerson. Right? He's a very intellectual philosopher sort. He's not the type of writer that a casual reader might read, but somebody who really loves absolutely amazing writing. Right? They might go to read Emerson. But Emerson does the same kind of thing. He starts with a poem up above his essay, Self-Reliance, one of his more famous essays. And really, since Self-Reliance is like a 40-page essay, right? He can't state the theme in one sentence, right? So his stating of the theme covers almost the entire first paragraph. He only sets the scene by saying, I read the other day some verses written by an eminent painter, which were original and not conventional. The soul always hears an admonition in such lines, let the subject be what it may. The sentiment they instill is of more value than any thought they may contain. Right? Then he goes into this whole long thing, all in bold. Right? To believe your own thought, to believe that what is true in your private heart is true for all men, that is genius. Speak your latent conviction. And he goes on to a whole bunch of things, right? All of which he covers in his essay. And that's the really important thing to remember, that whatever you say you're going to do in that stating of the theme, in that thesis statement, you have to deliver in your essay itself. Don't tell somebody you're going to take them to the ice cream store and take them to the hardware store instead, right? So you really want to be clear about what direction that essay is going to take. And if you've engaged the reader, if you've interested the reader, if you've given them some compelling reason to read on, they will. And in the end, the only judgment on a good piece of literature is, does the reader want to read the next sentence? And when they're finished, do they have that feeling like, yes, that was worth reading? So try one of these openings when you write an essay. You can basically do anything you want, but really that notion of setting the scene, introducing the topic somehow, and then stating it clearly, that's always been effective for every essay writer since the beginning of time. Right? And on another point, pardon the pun, what point of view do you write from? Do you use the I voice or do you not use the I voice? Personally, I don't care. But a lot of teachers say, no, you have to get rid of the I voice. The main argument for not saying I in an essay is when you're trying to prove a point that's the same for all people. It doesn't matter if it's Sally, it doesn't matter if it's Fred. Right? It's going to be the same for every person in the universe. And if you keep using your word I to make your points, people are just going to think, oh, that's just his thoughts. Maybe it's only true for him. Right? But for the most part, I always write using the I voice. Maybe I'm vain. Right? Sometimes I write with the I voice and I reread what I wrote and say, I sound a little pretentious in here. I'll take myself out of it. But really, when you're writing a personal narrative, you have to use the I voice. It sounds absurd if you don't. If you're writing an analysis of sorts, it's almost like being a scientist. You don't want to say, I think the sky is blue because of the ozone in the sky. No, it's good to say, no, the sky is blue because of the ozone in the sky. It's not something that's a unique experience to you. So, that said, use whatever feels best to use. Right? Or use whatever the teacher tells you to use. That's the ultimate rule if you're a student, I guess. Okay, so that's my little introduction to how to create an opening paragraph. And read it and use it as best you can. Thanks.